Kingsville Independent School District Board. We'll have roll call. Joe Morales.
Here.
Martin Chapa.
Here.
David Garcia.
Here.
Joseph Reese. James Galusing.
Here.
Donna Salinas.
Here.
And Brian Kugel is here. Let the record show there is a quorum of board members present. That this meeting has been posted in accordance with Government Code Chapter 551, the State of Texas Open Meetings Act. We move now to the moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
All right, we move now to item number 4, which is adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Motion made by Mr. Morales,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Chapa. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposition? Motion carries 6-0. Item number 5, public participation. Ms. Pettis, do we have anyone who would like to speak?
Yes, sir. Elizabeth Ramos is a parent, and the topics DOI/legislative and goals.
Fantastic. Ms. Ramos?
Am I getting the whole rundown of the laws?
5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Since it is hard for constituents to hear at home via YouTube, I will be speaking much louder tonight, not yelling. Well, here I am, finally where I belong, behind the public participation podium. My voice is much louder here than up there. And I also get the privilege to speak for many who are afraid to do so. Tonight, you will be discussing very little on the agenda topics presented tonight. You will ask mundane questions, and the professional staff will give you little information as possible to push whatever along, and you will buy it. It has been bought and paid for by you for over 2 years. Luckily, tonight, you will be talking about a snippet of the legislative budget board review and management and performance of KISD. That document right here, which you received last year, unedited, everyone up here should have had the time to read every word of this review. This review should be a building block for your superintendent goals and reviews, as well as your own. The board set goals for the superintendent at the beginning of November. Have you all received a copy of what exactly those goals are? If so, how long did it take you to actually receive them? It is now the beginning of March, over 4 months later, and nowhere on an agenda has there been any oversight of those goals, amendments of any goals, or anything to monitor or provide oversight of the only employee you have. You know how many of the 38 findings have been improved or corrected? Those are just the significant findings we found. How many other issues need addressing or need to be attached to a goal? There is a slew of issues that the district is currently in compliance with as of today. But the superintendent and the board are more pressed to pass a DOI to make the superintendent's job much easier than to know and learn what it is like to be fully in compliance before giving incentives to the superintendent and her direct staff. Your priorities is what's really out of compliance. There is zero foundation, there is zero accountability, and there is zero oversight that goes for the goals of the superintendent and to the board itself. You all should be ashamed of allowing it to go on this long. I have said this a million times and I will say it again. The assistant superintendent for special populations can stand up here and give you a statement of how SPED is improved. And look at me, I wrote a book, and you still don't have a clue of how bad the SPED is being mismanaged from the top to the bottom. With over 513 identified SPED students, you need a bigger budget for all the accommodations they need. You need more staff, such as aides, dyslexia teachers, special education teachers. You need more staff on the top of that for a contingency backup plan when staff takes off work for whatever reason. Meetings. I said many years ago that I wouldn't mind stacking the top to help the sped department, but I wanted to see it also being stacked at the very bottom as well. Instead, we have lost personnel at the bottom, and some that are here are frustrated, and I don't see the HR department out here working it to get qualified caring individuals to fill those spots to help provide those students with services and teacher support staff in the classroom on a consistent basis. KISD also doesn't pay them enough. KISD needs to do more to find these people. Instead, teachers are getting stipends for jobs they don't do, or the institute superintendent is busy giving administrative staff 4% raises and an executive title with a nice pay raise on top of that. Lowe's pays more, McDonald's pays more, Academy pays more, and they have less sped students per teacher ratio. The city of Kingsville pays more, and they also need to up their per rate hours for their employees. Do you get what I'm saying? Because it's not me the only one complaining. The gains you see in those reports about the sweat of the teachers and the support staff in the district, and they get treated like cockroaches, peasants, especially when services aren't being provided. They are shut up and told not to say anything to parents. This goes for every campus at this district. The other administration trying to hide the truth. And when they can't, they do stupid stuff like offer parents an opportunity for their kids to go to summer school. So KISD can't do their part, so the kids get punished with more school. Sounds idiotic and it's embarrassing. Thank you, Mr. Morales, for the staff and resource question. I'm sorry you got a political runaround answer about the real issue at hand. Get it together, you guys. Get organized, form board committees, provide board operating procedures, include board agenda request policy, meaning getting an item on the agenda. And more importantly, please vote for a new president that has time to get it together. I will see you guys in a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. We're moving down to item number 6, new business discussion of possible action regarding the District of Innovation DOI plan. Dr. Sandoval, this can be found in our packet on pages 2 to 11.
Thank you, Board President Kupal, Board of Trustees. The DIC also identified as our District of Innovation committee for the district has been reviewing the plan and worked on it since early October. They've been working on the plan and looking at redemptions. We've gone through all the timelines that we previously discussed here at one of our board workshops regarding the notice of notified parents, having the open meetings to be part of the discussions. And we met 2 weeks ago on the 23rd of February to approve the kind of draft plan you have before you. And it was approved by a vote of 21-0 from the committee. So before you got the draft plan for the DOI, with the board attention that we are considering as a district to move forward with our district innovation. So the administration recommends that we approve the plan as.
We have the timeline right there on the screen, but you have it in the DOI plan, just to show the numerous times that we have presented it in public hearings or public meetings at the DEICs, on the surveys, via email, of course, on the robocall reminders. The only thing that changed a little bit was on February 22nd, when they had the DEIC meeting. That was when the lockdown happened at Agent King. And so we allowed for anybody who couldn't come to that meeting from Agent King, we allowed them to vote via email, and that's the ones that voted sent it via email.
Right, are there any questions regarding the specific DOI plan?
So, excuse me, so for CTE and STEM, we're only requiring a minimum of 30 hours classroom management and professional development instead of full certification.
Exactly. If they're maybe a doctor or a nurse and they're going to teach a health science class, then before they begin, we're expecting them to have at least 30 hours of the classroom management. Doesn't mean their PD will not continue, just like we have continuing PD every year for our teachers and staff. It just means before getting into the classroom, we expect them to go through 30 hours. Oh, yes, well, it doesn't say that on there because, but doctor, like if we need a doctor or a nurse to do the health science, yes. The policeman or we don't have any, we don't have any law enforcement classes, we
But
don't have
the
that.
current CT laws are also already allow you to hire those that have work experience. Such as mechanics, your trades, people in trades, that don't necessarily have a bachelor, so currently allows them to do that under percent programs.
And this training that they go to, is it like a service center? Because years ago, we would send people to ESC one for training for this.
It'd be where we find the best.
Okay.
I mean, we start off with ESC too.
Mhm.
But sometimes they join other ESCs as well, or there may be another one that we really feel passionate about. I know some of the superintendents in the nearby areas, we're actually talking about doing some in conjunction with each other. For all of our teachers, because I think every district around us is a DOI, except us. Bishop is considering it, I think, but everybody else is.
Yeah, I know that some percent, I think it's because especially what they were specializing in, like auto mechanics back then. Things like that, that's where they offered it, was the ESC one.
Yeah.
So I think searching for the best thing, like you said, would be
For sure,
and that would be before they go in the classroom.
correct.
Okay.
We need to have that happen, for sure. But right now, we don't really have a shortage. We're still looking maybe for one area, but we're pretty good right now.
How many hours does it take to become a full teacher? I'm certified as teacher.
Well, you have to have your bachelor's degree.
Okay, so 30 hours minimum, they can trade 30 hours for 120 hours.
Well, the 120 hours you're talking about in a degree includes expertise in that area, right? So if these people are nurses or doctors, they would have already achieved hours of experience. Like you have people who have retired as a doctor or retired as a nurse.
But they've already got, that's what I'm saying. Is here you're saying, instead of getting a bachelor's degree, we need them to have 30 degrees, but anybody that has a doctorate has more than 30, I mean, they have more than a bachelor's degree.
Right.
So that argument, I think is out, because they've already got the bachelor's degree. You're just saying, no, they need 30 hours.
Yeah,
That
that's
would be
management.
Project management.
That would be above what they have already.
In addition to whatever certification we have,
Yes.
we need a minimum of 30 hours classroom.
I mean,
And then a lot of time work in here and everything.
And then that's what I'm asking is how much classroom management is required in a teacher certification.
Not bad.
That's what I'm trying to say is we're looking at reducing the standards, but reducing them from what?
teacher certification, 120 plus hours. They're required to get a bachelor's plus their teaching certification hours. Plus this teaching cert that is required part of.
Okay, so 69. I would assume 60 hours is basic coursework, so this is 30 hours on top of that, so they would have to have 90 hours. Because they need to have a bachelor's already. So you're talking about,
Let's take auto mechanics. You're not gonna have people coming out of the college of education qualified to teach auto mechanics effectively for a CTE course to be able to help these kids achieve certification. But you may find a mechanic who is already certified, may never have gone to college. But he's certified, he's willing to do this, but before we allow him to step into the classroom, he'd have to have 30 hours worth of classroom management.
and that's fine. I'm just wanting to make sure that we understand this, people. Watching how they're going to this meeting, because this is something I've needed to clarify, and I just wanted that stated. So that I can understand it here, because I feel if I can understand it, everybody can understand it.
But I don't agree that we're lowering the standards for like a well-being teacher or a health science teacher. We're trying to get the most skilled applicants to apply. And just because they don't have a teaching certificate doesn't mean they don't know the content and can't teach students like apprenticeships, things like that, to weld.
So you're
For
bringing
example.
in content experts
Right,
and all you're doing is giving them training on how to manage a class.
right.
That's what they're doing.
Okay, then in that case, I would like. I would be happy to vote on this if we brought in somebody from the discipline, because they're just saying the advisory team and it's naming who we're putting in here, but it doesn't say anything about an expert in that particular subject. To say the person knows what he's. It says, a hiring committee will be appointed to include teachers, administrators, members of the director advisory team. It doesn't say anything about anybody having to know what's being, that somebody being selected out of that group has to know anything about what's being taught. So if we're, we're going with, auto repair. But nobody on the advisory committee doesn't know anything about auto repair. They're just saying, here's a team, this is what it's made up of. So if we're saying we're gonna hire the best person, we need to have somebody in that advisory team that, or in that board, review team, that actually has some experience in working in that team. And I agree with you, the person may be very well qualified, and it may work, but we have just said, this is who it is, and none of them have to have any. we have to
Well,
put down-
So currently, we interview teachers. And we put a committee together for even like for the coach that we just hired. But everybody on that committee was not an expert in football or in baseball or in any specific sport. But we were all part of the committee because of our experience in being in education. So,
That's somebody that has a degree in some sort of education. And so you've got the school standing behind it, but we're saying we don't have to hire anybody with any collegiate background other than the 30 hours. They have to give a degree, they have. And everybody that's involved in making a decision about an athletic committee, I mean, we're talking about somebody that, well, they need to know about athletics and you've got coaches that work for you. But if we're looking to hire somebody in that field or related field or something close should be, included on the board. Now, that may be some other thing that we talk about. That may be another rule that we talk about.
so like you'd like to recommend, like if we're gonna have a hiring committee, that it be somebody maybe from the community. That has expertise in that field, which has been done also. It would be our CNI department and our HR department that would work together to form the committee.
That would be, I'm just trying to say. There is no way, absolutely none. And I'm an educator, that I should be in my committee to hire an automotive repair person. Because I know absolutely nothing about it.
No, but if that person is credentialed, you can rely on those credentials.
Yes, but you're just saying.
And then they're gonna come in, they're gonna be put on a probationary contract for a year, so within that year, if they don't make it, you can always just get rid of,
Well, what I'm saying is-
terminate it.
But that's what you're saying, is we're wanting to go around the credentialing weeks. No, so that we can hire, it just said, they have to do it in 30 hours.
They have to be certified in that field.
So just, I think the idea is if you hire, you say you bring in a mechanic that's ASC certified. So they're gonna have to be vetted like every other person being employed. So it'll be up to the committee to research what is ASC certification. Does that make them a qualified applicant for that particular position? And that will be up to the committee to decide.
I agree, but there should be somebody on the committee that understands all of it, instead of just a random group of people that fit these qualifications.
But we have, like law enforcement classes, for example, and we have, we have someone certified at the federal level. Would he be on the committee then?
You can be invited to be on the committee.
I agree.
But we currently hire, like, we'll interview math teachers that can teach calculus. And, not many of us know calculus, but we know if the teacher's gonna be a good fit for the classroom. And that's the first thing is, first we have to make sure that they have all the certifications. And then the second thing is, are they gonna be good for our kids, good for kids? And then talking about pedagogy and things like that, but I can't guarantee you that everybody on the committee will know the exact
That's what I'm saying, I'm not asking for everybody. I'm just saying, at least there should be a representative that is under to a related field. So if it's somebody that's teaching completely in the classroom, yes, one of the classroom teachers could do it. But now you're talking about CTE classes that are not taught in a normal, average teaching environment. And so I would say, okay, maybe a respected CTE teacher ought to be one of the people that's.
Oh, for sure.
And that's all I'm saying is it isn't.
Yes, no, the career and tech, team definitely would be part of this, for sure.
One of the things that we normally look at, Dr. Travis, is utilizing somebody from our advisory committee. If they're in that capacity, if we don't go in that direction.
And we have a large advisory committee with, from all the different fields.
But there's, I'm just saying that there's a lot of CTE things and a lot of, that I should never be picked for. It should be me. And I'll use myself as an example for that. If you put me on, I wouldn't be helpful. Other than being one of the other votes, I look at other things, but I could never review the CTE experience.
We'll definitely take that into consideration, definitely.
And these people coming on board, once they're trained, is there a mentor? I mean, we do a local mentor in the department, but is there one that comes in, periodically from the ESC two where they're trained possibly? I mean, they, how they do kind of walkthroughs?
It depends on if they're in an alternative program.
Okay. Sure.
Because I really have to think, because I know we don't. So,
No, okay.
I mean, the administrators are the ones in charge to,
We sign it.
monitor.
Any other questions regarding?
Dr. Perez, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Do we have any, first of all, I want to thank Dr. Sandoval and also the committee for DOI for all the time that they put into this, but do we have anybody, Dr. Perez, from the committees there present today that might want to just get a little bit of feedback from them if we could?
No, we invited them though, if they wanted to, and they came, remember, like, oh gosh, it was in December.
Yeah.
When we had 2 or 3 of them that were here speaking on it. So they have already come once, and at this point, they didn't think it was needed, but we have another DEIC meeting tomorrow. The list is there of all the DEIC committees, and so we've been publishing that and sending it numerous times. So that way people could speak without us having to feel like, or them having to feel like they're in front of us, trying to speak freely.
And I think, and I apologize, but for taking too long, but I think that to have the local control that we're talking about allows us to, as a district, to decide those flexibilities and what's going to best suit like our needs for our kids. And I think we need to get ahead of this because of what's coming through legislation that's going to be passed down, and these charter move for charter schools. I think we have to be ready for that to be able to compete, to not lose so much enrollment and also have quality. And I agree with Mr. Mireles, that we have a monitoring, a sort of a how to grade our people that do come in to work with our kids. But that's as we're going with it. You see, as we're going with the program, that's how we're going to learn these things. So thank you so much for bringing that idea to us, Dr. Perez.
Thank you.
Because changes are coming.
Any other questions regarding DOI? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion has been made by Ms. Salinas. Mr. Garcia, would you like to second it?
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, there's motion and to been made and properly second regarding adoption of the District of Innovation Plan to be submitted to the state. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0. We move now to item number 7. The board will enter into closed session in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code 551.1071, and 551.074 to deliberate and consider the following. A, discussion with council regarding legal and personnel matters. No action will be taken until we return to open session. We're entering closed session at 5:55 P.M. We will adjourn to the back.
Okay, so should I leave this stuff?
We're unmuted for live.
All right, we now return to open session and take necessary actions on matters which may be discussed in open session upon which action may be taken. We're returning to open session at 6:38 PM. Dr. Pettis, is there any further information or actions that are needed by the superintendent or administration? There being no further action, do I hear a motion to adjourn the board meeting? Motion made by Mr. Morales, seconded by Mr. Glusing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We will be adjourning the board meeting at 6:38 PM. The Board of Trustees will now conduct a workshop to discuss the following: A, facilities assessment; B, review of legislative budget board management and performance review sections 1 and section 5. We begin with our facility assessment. Dr. Pitts.
Thank you, Mr. Kupel, Superintendent, that is, members of the board. Let me give a brief summary of what led us to this point of the facility assessment, and then I will turn it over to Gary Maria to present the facility study. We identified many needs in the district. We have a district that has many aging buildings that are quite old, and Mr. Marek will speak a little bit to them just in a minute. We have many leaks. We had many leaks in the roof, so that was where we started tackling it. We didn't want the students to be in danger. We didn't want our buildings to keep degrading, so we started with the roofs, and we did repair the leaks. Whenever a leak pops up, we address it right away. We had to replace the entire maintenance shop roof because there were dozens of leaks, and it's been leaking for probably 20 years there. But there are many additional needs that all our buildings have, and unfortunately, we don't have the resources to tackle all of them at once. So our strategy has been to come in and get a facilities assessment done to get all the information that we need, approximately how much it will cost to fix each one of those needs, and then we can put together a 5 to 10 year plan so that we can tackle those needs in order of priority. I'm gonna ask Gary Merritt to come on up and present the facility assessment, and then we will take any questions and talk about next steps.
How are you?
Good.
Again, I'm Gary Mark with TASB. I've been at TASB about 10 years. Prior to TASB, I had a 29-year career with the state government, 14 years at TEA, doing school facility standards and things like that. So, okay, you know, my voice carries pretty good. So I got one of the church voices that just goes. But anyway, that's kind of my background. I got a lot of background in accessibility and all that. But we had a team of about, I don't remember who was all here, 4 or 5 people in addition to myself, doing the assessment back late summer. Right? Okay. And anyway, so I'm just going to share with y'all some of the findings. I always do like to point out, you know, y'all do have some aging facilities, you know, the kind of vocational area at the high school. I believe Harold and Perez are over campuses, and you know, some other scattering of buildings. But so if you see things on here, you know, it's not a reflection that the M&O department is bad. It's just that's the status of the world. That's the status of all the schools we go see in Texas. If you've got older facilities, you know, you do everything you can to make it look good. And generally, you know, everything's well maintained in the district. It's just age brings issues, and so that's not a reflection of M&O. If y'all remember forget what we called it, 2009, we had all the bad economic times, and school districts were getting cut in state funding and all of that. M&O budget was hit hard during those times. So deferred maintenance really built up for a lot of districts, and many of them still haven't caught up with that. So we go ahead and dive into this. I just kind of want to give you all a brief background on what we kind of evaluate, these are the kind of the main ones. You'll see some pages that interior and exterior breakdowns. I'm not going to go into tons of detail. I think I've seen this, had a peek at it ahead of time. But school site, systems and components, site safety and security, educational adequacy, support space, portable buildings and ADA accessibility are kind of the scope of things we're trying to look at. Portable buildings, we don't really evaluate that much, other than to note if they're kind of good, fair, poor. Primarily, we always, if you have a lot of portable buildings, we always encourage districts to get rid of them and try to replace it with some type of permanent space. Because portable buildings should be portable, they should be temporary. You know, do actually have some surplus square footage now with in what I call inactive campuses. So, you know, if you needed space for a program, you do have a little bit of flexibility to perhaps use some space in some of those buildings. But generally speaking, those are the kind of the scope of things. I will mention safety and security. We're not a security, you know, there are security consultants out there who do deep dives into security and really that we've always said, and even before the Uvalde kind of really, I think, you know, finally the result, you know, one thing about Uvalde was it did finally seem to spur people that we've got to do some things. Like you're seeing legislation now being proposed, and there's, you know, some directives from the legislature and the governor, you know, over last summer. And so, but our look at safety and security has always been more common sense measures. Is your campus fenced? You know, do you have you know, one entry into the school? A lot of just kind of the common sense things, burglar alarms, you know, sufficient cameras. We never really go into some of those things like types of safety glass and stuff that you'll get the security consultants out that kind of give you good feedback on those kind of things. So these are the exterior things we generally look at. It is a comprehensive look at the campus. There's some more things: student loading, pedestrian services, campus security systems. Again, the exterior, we're kind of looking at fences, limited access to entrances, and you know, camera systems, things like that. Interior areas, your heating, ventilation, air conditioning, those things that really kind of affect the health of the building. Restrooms, plumbing. Let's see what else is on that. And we look at the academic learning spaces. That's kind of what I brought from PEA, you know, TAS school facility standards. They actually just upgraded the standards about a year ago, but the prior standards that were around for about 15 years were actually written by me when I was at TEA. So that's kind of the expertise I bring to the team is how do we evaluate academic spaces to make sure they're educationally adequate for, you know, both environmentally healthy, but also good academic spaces for good learning. And there's a few more things. Yeah. So I'll drive right in. I'm going to spend a little more time on the first one just to tell you what some of the initials mean and kind of, you know, that general aspect of it. Harrell Elementary School. Let's see, Harold's a twin of Perez, is that right? One of the twins, more or less. The first number you see up there is the initials FCI. That means Facility Condition Index. And I was telling Peter earlier, it used to be that if you had a facility condition index of, you know, 40–50%, it became a pretty good clue that your school has aged out and it's time to start thinking about maybe replacing it. Because at that time, you know, replacement costs, renovation costs were more normal. You know, nowadays though, replacement costs are, you know, where 4 years ago we might have told you it costs $200 a square foot to replace a school. Now you're looking at $500–600 a square foot. So it's nuts, and it's kind of throwing that FCI number out of whack a bit. But you really have to kind of look at a campus and understand, you know, what's happening at this campus, what our needs are, and not just use the FCI to decide if it's time to replace it or not. But the FCI is determined by taking the condition budget, which the condition budget, you'll see there, it's the cost of total identified needs. So whatever we walk through the building and we identified some things that might need repair or improvement, and then we put some dollars next to that, that totaled up number from everything we identified during our assessment. And at this campus, it's $5.2 million. Well, based on the square footage, the replacement cost, I think at this time, we were using right at $400 a square foot. So when we come for our annual update next year, that will probably bump up a little bit more, but so the replacement cost would be building a brand new school exactly the same size. It doesn't really include the site things like parking and utility, utilities you'd have to bring. If you had a 50,000 square foot school, this is what it would cost to replace and build 50,000 square feet more. So anyway, you divide condition budget, replacement cost, by condition budget by replacement costs, that gives you that 28%. So that's what the FCI is. So is it, again, if you think about it, well, only, we only have to spend 28% of the cost of the new one to repair it and kind of make it, like new or as new as possible. And so those are what you'll see these on every slide. So I won't re-explain them on each one, but that's how that is calculated. And then the capacity is calculated at an elementary school. We look at how many available classrooms you have for homeroom use. Because, in elementary school, kids pretty much are assigned one teacher all day. I mean, they may bring up for music or PE, but by and large, they're coming back to that same classroom space every day. So we don't count art and if you have science on the elementary, we don't count those rooms in your capacity, which is look at your homerooms. And we take about 22 students per room since that's the state requirement for elementary class sizes. And that's kind of how we get to capacity. So 76% in any district that has any kind of growth, we would be telling you that number is a number that might trigger you to start looking at, enlarging the school or replacing it. But, y'all's situation, speaking with Dr. Pitts, you may have low growth or no growth or even some loss of students. So the capacity is perfectly fine for you because that gives you 24% of the campus to kind of, expand and contract in, as needed when anything happens with student population. So the key immediate needs on most of these campuses, if you go to the dashboard, and if you ever want to see it, I'm sure Dr. Pitts can pull it up to show it to you, but the dashboard that we have, the online system, it identifies kind of like, I'm not always a fan of the word, but it's a kind of high priority side, and then there's additional priority. They're all priorities. They all are things that need to ultimately be done, to keep the schools up and running. But the high priority is kind of more like, man, if you could get to these first, that might be better. I like to think of it, maybe these are years 1 and 2, and these are years 3 through 5, But, in 5 years, we would hope everything that's in that condition budget maybe could be addressed in some way. So I kind of concentrate on the things that are really kind of the most pressing on each one. But at this particular school, the bitumen roof is aging and shows probably near the end of its life. So recommend replacing that. There weren't a lot of ADA restrooms, and there was no ADA access to playgrounds and equipment. The stage steps and rails, you can walk on there, but there's no access. You don't have to have a lift or any kind of ramp to that stage, but it'd be nice to bring the steps and rails up to ADA compliance. Security improvements, we kind of try to leave the detail out of this, generally speaking, security improvements might mean you need just some additional cameras or I'm trying to think, or maybe improve fencing or things like that. So that's kind of what we, again, typically look at there. I think repair, resell asphalt paving, I think district-wide, that's kind of a common thing you'll see in the reports. Some of the playground equipment was aging, and that was reported by the principal too, I believe, in their survey. And then this line, numerous exterior and interior maintenance projects, you're going to see that on every one of these. That kind of covers that second priority list there, because every campus, there's some wording about maybe these things need painting or fixing, so there is kind of a checklist. That's kind of getting into a micro report, so I don't want to go into that type of detail for y'all, but just understand that there is just kind of some things that, just need some, a little bit of attention to keep the school running in a good condition for you. And then long-term needs, this is gonna be pretty much typical on all your older campuses. After about 30 years, we typically think electrical plumbing infrastructure is starting to age out. So just, paying attention to that, if you're gonna use the school for another 20 or 30 years, you just wanna be sure you're kind of upgrading the electrical plumbing whenever you get the chance. Harvey Elementary, I think Harvey's a little newer, and you can see that facility condition index kind of reflects that because it's only 4%. So the condition budget there was almost 1.2 million, replacement 28 million. Yeah, again, you're at a 71% capacity, which is fine, with where you are at a stable enrollment in the district. Not a lot of big things on this campus, again, improved ADA access to playgrounds and equipment. Same kind of security improvements, and again, maybe some painting and interior and exterior improvements here and there. I think parking was fine at this campus. Yes, sir.
Can you give us an example of ADA access to playground?
Well, ADA access to playgrounds, what the ideal playground has a walk of some type to the edge. And then you don't have to have the playground surface be entirely that rubber surface where a wheelchair can travel on it. But there, a modern playground equipment will have various kind of like, I'm not sure what you exactly call them, little platforms that are about 1 to 2 feet high, that a child in a wheelchair that feels strong enough can literally slide onto that. And if he's got the upper body strength, kind of climb and pull his way around and explore a playground equipment, just like a non-disabled child would be able to do. So, so you can have, I've seen districts that they do like a little sidewalk, so added material that allows them to get up to those things. So it's still a safe fall material, but it allows a wheelchair to travel up. So getting to some of that equipment, not every single piece of equipment in a playground, but if you've got some swings, you should have an accessible swing, you should have an accessible, island and numerous kind of positions on there. I'm also a registered accessibility specialist. My first state job back in '84 was the early years of it wasn't called ADA back then, but accessibility statutes and things with the state law. So I've kept up with it through the years. Now, you're not going to get in trouble with this unless you get a parental complaint, like with a child, in a wheelchair that says my child can't use the playground, or if either the Department of Education, Federal Department of Education, or the state TA Civil Rights Office, if they come out and do an inspection, they might write you up on the ADA stuff. But the Texas Department of Licensing Regulation is probably not going to come out and tag you on it unless they get it in the papers. That makes sense. Okay. And again, this is a newer campus, so no real long-term needs at this point. Perez is going to be similar to Harrell. Your FCI here is 32%. Condition budget 6.3 versus 20 million replacement cost. You're at 81% capacity here. At Perez, you've got some aging HVAC units. So anytime you replace that, we always recommend, if needed, upgrade your energy management system, rebalance the system, things like that. Again, some the bitumen, I always probably mispronounce that, but it appears to be aging, and there were signs inside. You could see stained ceiling tiles and things. So there were some signs that there's probably some leaks or had problems with leaks in the past. And so the built-up gravel roof looked pretty good, but it may need some resealing in some places just to be safe. The same comments here as that Harold on ADA, so restrooms and playgrounds and stage. I think there was one parking space that didn't have a vertical sign, so that's up there. And the rest of that is similar to security, repair, reseal, asphalt paving, repair, replace aging playground equipment, and the other projects that if you dig in there, you'll see. I will say this about paving. If you've got a few potholes here and there, I mean, it makes sense to try to, maybe patch bad spots and then put a seal coat on there. I know that you can get those people that will come out and spray that black seal on there. I've seen a district one time that had really bad parking, and the next time I visited, they had sprayed it on there, but the underlying bad condition was still there. I mean, it was not a good investment, but the old fashioned seal coating where you just, you patch the underneath to where it's stable, and then you put fresh asphalt, fresh rock on it. That's a lot more affordable than letting a parking lot degrade so bad that you literally have to tear it up and rebuild it from scratch, new base and new foundation and all that stuff, so. So that middle school, again, newer, and your FCI is pretty good here. If you're under 20%, under 10% is ideal for facility condition index. If you're under 20, though, you're still pretty good. You're at 52% capacity there. You've got some aging HVAC units there. Again, some roof work that needs to be done, but not a lot of major needs there. That's a nice campus. I really thought that was a good looking campus, and one that should take a lot of pride in as far as looks and upkeep and all. It was good. I will say this: when I got on campus, even though I think we had tags or whatever, we got asked a lot, what are we doing? And so kudos, because we are happy, even though we're wearing our printout or our visitor tag or whatever, to see that staff cares, enough to make sure we truly belong there. So that was well done on the whole thing out. King Early College High School, there's 3 lines up there, because if you go onto the online report, we've got that high school broken down into 3 sections. So you've got the main building and Gomez Sports Complex, which are basically buildings that are, I think, 10 years or so in age or less. They're not real old. The vocational fine arts and athletics, those are older facilities. And then the ag complex, that's the little farm out in the country. And so it wasn't anything real in need there. I believe we all were replacing a roof when I was there. I'm getting mixed up with the is that okay? I see so many districts have to like reset my mind sometimes. This is where I saw that. So it was obvious that that was being taken care of. It looked like a nice complex. I grew up in a small town, so the ag life makes sense to me. Again, main building and Gomez Sports Complex, great shape, brand new buildings, not too much there. Your biggest attention at the high school campus is obviously the vocational buildings. I think most in need of some attention. I think Chris, who was part of our team, said that the one vocational building was kind of more or less shut down and really wasn't being used much for anything. So that would take. I think that drove that cost up a little bit, because I think we kind of put a price in there. If you were to bring this out to a usable, good educational setting, it would have some dollars attached to it. But otherwise, kind of the same stuff you've seen where some of the roofs there, and I think in some of these the roofs some look a little worse than the others, but if all your roofs are the same roofing type, sometimes it's just easier to kind of think about replacing them all at one time. So I think we kind of looked at it that way from the pricing standpoint. Improving some ADA parking, because the parking, there was some parking there, but they tended to be regular sized spaces that people had just kind of stuck a sign in front. So that didn't really meet that 13-foot width that's required. And the little bleachers, your bleachers at all 3 of the stadiums, the little football practice field there, and the baseball and the softball stadiums. If you were building something brand new today, you would put a wheelchair, you'd have to ramp up to the seating, put indented wheelchair spaces. I don't think any of those were present there. And then the rest of this is repair recent asphalt parking and drives. Replace the track surface of that little football field that was in bad shape. And then security and other projects. I think I did, and part of that condition budget, I will say, I believe I put in, just because a lot of school districts like to know what it would cost if, hey, if we put turf on our baseball field or turf on our softball field, what would that price be? So that's in that condition budget. I put that in there just so you kind of have pricing standpoint for it, not necessarily that you have to do that, but with an athletic field, that seems to be things that people at least kind of like to know what the cost range is and that type of stuff. Okay, Fleabird. I identify as inactive, I believe it actually on a private head start program in there. And then I think the one building is being used by this alternative program at the high school page. And that's kind of the newest building on campus, so that part of it was fine. 24% FCI. I think the front core of that building had a 1940s plaque on it, but so it is kind of an older facility, there's parts of it. So, how important these things are to y'all, it's something that y'all have to figure out as a district, since it's not being used as a full-time campus anymore. Obviously wanting to maintain the occupied areas, but, there is some aging HVAC here, roofs too. There were numerous ADA things that we identified there. But kind of, again, the same, with the older buildings, you tend to kind of run into the same scope of things. Memorial Middle School, I think this one was completely empty, but kind of surprising that you see 15% condition index for a school. I think it's 4 years old, but I was telling Dr. Pitts that building's solid as a rock. It's got the bones there. It's all the interior walls are CMU, masonry walls, which they take a beating with junior high students. They're tough on school, so that's the kind of walls you want if you ever decide to reopen that campus. The replacement cost is $40 million. That's based kind of, that'll probably be higher next year when we come in and update that. It's $40 million, but a $10 million investment would probably bring that. Would be probably what it would take to kind of freshen it up and bring it, and maybe buy you another good 20 or 30 years out of it. So for a 40-year-old building, that's a pretty good to at least know that. So yeah, there's some identified things there. The roofs, I think that's probably the biggest priority if you want to save that building and keep it healthy for maybe future use in any way. There were some rusted gutters and downspouts, but all the other stuff is kind of similar to what you saw at the other ones. And again, long-term needs, this is for all I'll repeat this again, for all the older facilities, that aging electrical and plumbing, to kind of keep that up to date as best you can. But administration building, we're at right here. Trying to think what's driving that cost so much. I think between the roofs and the HVAC units and probably the paving, that's driven that FCI up a bit. I kind of like when districts take a little school, save it for use as an administration building, especially if it has some, some good memories for the residents of the community or whatever. But so for an administration building, I think they'll set up well here and looks good. And like I said, it's just kind of that normal, taking care of the things that are aging out, because if you replace the roofs and the HVAC units, you've got 20 more years right there, without on kind of your major cost items. Transportation, warehouse, MOPAC field. Y'all have already taken care of one thing, which is, as Dr. Pitt said, replace that tin roof over the maintenance and the asphalt roof, shingle roof of the restroom concession building over at MOPAC field. Looks like it may have a little bit of damage to it, so I just put a cost in to replace that too. And then kind of again the same things here. There's one little portable building there that had an old HVAC unit on it, but otherwise, I think the warehouse was pretty new. The transportation building was pretty new. That addition to the maintenance building was pretty new. So kind of, it actually has a complex. It's in pretty good shape. The maintenance building, getting a new roof on there takes care of most of your issues with that end of it. MOPAC field is MOPAC field, no ADM. That's really the bleachers. So if you're using that, that could be an issue if you ever got a complaint. While I was out there, a neighbor across the street walked up to me and said, man, this thing's a mess when we have any event here, with parking and traffic. And best I could suggest is maybe put some striping on that little concrete pad out there where you'll park, just to maybe control, where people park and stuff, and give it, delineate that a little bit, but I don't usually write neighborhood complaints into our reports, but I just pass that along, because that did kind of drive that parking. It's not an ideal parking lot, but for a facility that's just used 10, 20 times a year, I'm guessing, you don't need to invest in a hardcore parking lot. That's a solid concrete surface, which you could probably make it function a little bit, just in how you define how the traffic moves through it. And then this is the last slide, the other support facilities, boat options, alternative academy, pretty good shape, older building, but I think they both need new roofs and some other things. The alternative cafeteria was being used for storage. I forget which I'll actually call that campus.
It was called McRoberts.
McRoberts, but at the time I was there was stuff stored in there, but my understanding is now that it's not being used at all. And I believe I'll move that storage over to the board. So, but yeah, it's an old 85%. It makes more sense to, bulldoze that down and maintain it and spend money on it. But that's kind of it. I did make the comment there, determine if there's a long-term need for the alternative cafeteria buildings. But other than that, we don't try to direct y'all too much. We just try to give y'all as much data as we can to help y'all then make decisions about what's the best use for our buildings and our futures and all of that. Before I move into my close-ups, are there any particular questions about anything in here? This one cool thing, it used to be that about 3 or 4 years ago, if you hired KISD to do an assessment, I'm just going to use a number as an example. I don't know what we charge off, because I kind of stay off the contract side. But let's say, for example, y'all would have come to us 4 years ago for an assessment. We might have charged y'all $30,000 if you paid us upfront, And at the end of that, you'd have gotten a 1-inch thick report, a couple hundred pages, paper report. It wouldn't have had any cost numbers in it. And, as soon as we walk away, it starts aging. 6 months to a year later, it's kind of, old data. This new planning membership we do, it's slightly more expensive than, it might be, say, $33,000, but it's split up over 3 years. And so you're paying $11,000 in year 1, and $11,000 in year 2, $11,000 in year 3. So we actually lose money in year 1, because that's what all our expenses are, to travel and come up here and spend time on it. But what we do by having a living assessment is that we have we twice yearly will ask the district to submit surveys to us and give us updates on things y'all fixed and repaired. And then I'll come back probably next fall sometime, late summer, and visit with Mike and Dr. Pitts, and kind of walk through what y'all reported on the survey. And if there's something new, and say, hey, we've had some issues here, can you go look at that? Maybe add that in. So we try to keep it. We don't reassess everything, because that's really not needed. If you're doing a good job kind of keeping us up to date on major repairs or replacements, then and then every year too, if the pricing that we use within the system has changed, then we'll go in and we'll update the workbooks to reflect current pricing. So when you're doing M&O planning every year in your budget, you should have good numbers to at least work from. Yes, sir.
How long did this take you? 1, 2, 3 days?
We had, I'm trying to remember. We had 5 people at least, including myself, and we were here 3 full days. And then I discovered that I was lacking some stuff. So Chris came back another time, spent a couple hours, and grabbed some photos of some HVAC units and stuff. And there's still some data I kind of wish I had. So like on my annual visit, I might spend a little extra time and grab some. But I think there's a chiller at the high school that I don't have the number, so I put an estimate in it. And I know it's only a few years old, so it's not a concern yet. I'd like to get So if there's anything y'all ever see that's missing, and you think here you have this here, but there's no detail on it, I can fill it in and update it for you on its needs, so.
This was broken down campus by campus, it's kind of general categories. They have the detail.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, it's a group cool system. If you ever get a chance to look at it. It's, yeah, you can dive into it and get lost in it. There's a lot of good stuff. And we have a page that just gives you roofing information, a page that just gives you HVAC information. And then a pricing page where you can actually see the items that's coming on a spreadsheet and thing. And then that, what we call the dashboard, the main page. And we have it kind of color coded. Green generally means, it's this particular item is good. Yellow means it might need some attention. Red needs extra attention. So, I wrote I have different people collecting data, but I try to write all the reports so that the language is consistent from campus to campus. Because I found sometimes we have 2 or 3 people writing for a district. And the way one person writes one campus sounds different than another. But we're all saying the same thing, but I think it's, my vernacular, I have a certain way of phrasing things. I just think it makes it easier for the customer to kind of always see it worded the same.
We have an overview that like you just gave us right away. And but are we gonna have access to the detail?
That's up to y'all, administration, to share that with y'all, yeah.
And I think we'll probably get into that a little deeper as we get into budget.
Dr. Sandoval, would you like to, we kind of want to talk a little bit about next steps. This was really the first step in the process and all that. Dr. Sandoval, start.
Thank you, Dr. Pitts. We looked at that breakdown, the one that you asked about, Mr. Foucault, because it does have a lot of information specific to each campus, broken down by HVAC, roofing, and all the other things that have been recommended to be replaced. So, in our conversation, when we started digging through the different campuses and looking at specific identified needs, one of the first things we need to do is we got to go in there and we got 6 of those requested or priorities, right? There's 3 different priorities of possible repairs that can be made. We need to determine what is biggest priority to us. One of the things that we did see on there was the floor at the old Gillette cafeteria. Do we want to make that a priority? Do we want to put that as a maybe level 2 or level 3 priority? Because the floors, it's still a usable floor. It's a VCT floor, tile floor. Do we necessarily need to spend $68,000 to repair that floor now, or can we put that in the back burner, do that in 2-3 years? So we got to go in there, identify specific needs that need to be done quickly. Some of it need to be HVAC, maybe some of it be roof. Because roofs, we know they leak, they cause more damage inside. HVAC, lighting, we know that if they're inefficient, it's costing more money in electricity. So those are things that we need to identify as a team to determine how to best prioritize our current needs.
I had a question, in reviewing all these, we get these and whatever. And with summer coming around and the summer sports and the safety of the kids. At the high school, to replace the track surface at the football field. I really feel that should be a top priority because. It is a safety hazard for the kids that come in for the summer track and for all those other sports. I tried walking out there and it's dangerous. So, I mean, I don't know how anybody else feels, but I really feel that should be a top priority because it's a safety one.
We definitely need to consider all those needs, Ms. Salinas. As we break it down, we will definitely discuss it with Dr. Pettis. We can share that stuff with the board, get your input on how to best tackle our primary or necessary needs. The other thing we'll have to be looking at is what can we do in-house? Because some of the things that are recommended are, paint doors, paint door frames. Things that we can do in-house and we can actually incorporate them into our local budget, things that we already budget for as part of our general maintenance repair through maintenance. The other thing we need to look at is budget. How much is Dr. Pitts going to allow us to spend in this process? And my recommendation is that we start looking at initially, we're going to have to go in big at the beginning, that first year, to get some of the things that need to get done quickly and more efficiently. We need to probably dig into some of our savings if need be, but that's a decision that you as a board will have to make it, and with consultation with Dr. Pitts on what we think we could possibly, absorb as a district. We need to consider that to be able to make some of these necessary improvements. And the last thing, once I got a number, then we can put a time frame on it. And we can say this is a 5-year, 8-year plan on how do we tackle this problem. But until we got those things, those 4 things that I identified, the last would be that timeline to put together and deal and say, okay, we think we can do it in 8 years. But a big thing's gonna be the money. The more money we get up front, the shorter the timeline. If we get less money up front, then the timeline may be a 10-year process, but we definitely need to look at all 4 aspects of what I identified to help us put this plan together.
One thing I put in the plans that it goes into the future, say 3 or 4 years. You can use these prices for a year right now, but you almost need to add 20 to 25% each year. I mean, that's what we've been seeing just in the last 2 years. Well, the other thing we need to do is look at what our resources are. Because some of the things that you named on there, just like painting doors, but some of the things for outside, I don't think we need licensed installers to put them in. We have welders. I mean, we teach welding class. We've got a university that's got a civil engineering department. They're looking for projects for you to do. And you can give them some outdoor planning, some concrete work, for instance, the ADA on on the stands. How do we upgrade that? And we've got people that we can make it part of a learning experience. And we don't have to go out. I mean, it's not something that needs the same certification as going and switching out an air conditioner. And I would suggest that. But we do have opportunities.
Let me speak a little bit with the budget that Dr. Sandoval was talking about. This is our infrastructure, our facilities are one of many needs the district has. Our primary goal is to educate students, but we want to do them in the safest possible way with facilities that will accommodate that. So we have many competing needs. Will be in the next few months. KISD will also be conducting a pay study, and we'll be comparing the pay of our salaries to other districts that have similar sizes and demographics. And of course, everything that we do on the instructional side as well too. And then technology costs are huge right now. And of course, we already brought to you the property and casualty insurance as well. So there are many competing needs you saw out there. I mean, some of these repairs altogether can be in the tens of millions of dollars, and there's no way we can do every single one of those at once. So we are going to need to, as Dr. Sandoval said, sift through it, bring some of the top priorities to the district, and then we are in a year, it's a biennial year where the state of Texas sets the budget formula for all of the school districts. So not till the end of May will we really know how much money to expect for the next 2 years. So that's going to delay the process as well. So once we put everything else together, all of these discussions will be in the budget process, and we may say, hey, this year we have $1 million to put forth. Maybe we have $1.5 million, depending on all of our other competing needs. Now, the other thing that we also have is we have a healthy fund balance right now as well too. So that's something that we're going to look at with the board, and we will talk about what a healthy fund balance is, and maybe how much of that we can put toward in the first year tackling some of these immediate needs. So any questions on the budget for any of these expenditures?
No, as we move forward on budget, I'd like to see the detailed report of this testing study.
Absolutely.
Also on the staffing, I know that it's not the facility part, but when we do the KISD study on that, we're gonna be looking at our student population. And they make recommendations on the mandates. So as far as needing more people or less people, will that be in that report?
No, this is a pay study report. So it specifically looks at how much our employees are making compared
Or is
to.
it going to do pay study then,
Pay study.
not staff?
Correct.
Dr. Pitts, I know you mentioned that we have a healthy fund balance, but we also got to take into consideration that ESSER will no longer be in play here this next year or two.
You know, that's a very good point, Mr. Garcia. We have been We have been fortunate enough to benefit from a lot of ESSER funds, and next year is really gonna be a year where we're gonna see that big decrease. So it is gonna be a challenge to balance the budget with all our needs that we have, as well as all of these infrastructure costs as well. So very good point.
Anything else on facility structure? Study? If not, thank you all very much.
If you have questions, direct them through Mike and Dr. Pitts, and, we can get answers for you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, guys, we're gonna move quickly to the legislative budget board study, 2 sections. Let's start with the second one because I sent that out kind of late. Section 5, it didn't dawn on me till this weekend that dealt with facilities management. And so if you had a chance to review it, it kind of tells you, well, we hit a big part of that tonight in going through at least an initial assessment. You see the assessment there. There are other pieces of this that we have hit in that we have now centralized some of the management of our facilities. So we're not spending a lot of time with facility management tonight. I just wanted y'all to have that, to have somewhat of a background before we had the discussion with KISD tonight, and we'll continue to look at this as we move forward through the budget process. What I would like to do tonight is go through pieces of section 1 of this legislative budget review. And if you've got your book, great. And if you don't, I'll do my best to just kind of keep you up to speed with where we are. The first section dealt with the district organization and community involvement. And for those of you who weren't here, which is 3 of you, this started probably in October, November of 2021. And it started by a phone call to the district announcing that this was going to be done. And it wasn't a gotcha, but we were on a list that they said, we're going to come in and do a deep dive. They called every single board member and spoke. I was on the phone with them 35, 40 minutes. And they asked a lot of questions. From about October to January, February, I think they covered pretty much all the board. We were in a transition period at that time. 4 members of the board had been on the board for about a year. There were 3 of us that had been on longer. Since that period of time, lots has happened. We had a board president that died. We had a second board president who was not reelected, and then we've got some new board members now. And so the makeup of the board has changed pretty dramatically since that time. But I want the findings they had were valid in a lot of areas. And so I want to move pretty quickly through some things just to make sure that you realize where some things are. And so if we still have these same concerns and we have some of these same findings that we do address them when we address them quickly. First thing I'd like to do is turn to page 13. There's a whole bunch of important stuff, and I'm not trying to belittle anything else, but I've got some specific areas I want to hit. On page 13, it starts with some of the first criticism, and it talks about the concern that both the board and the staff had, that some of the board members were more involved with the day-to-day operations versus the policy and the oversight, and that there was a lot of communication between staff directly to board members, and instead of following the correct procedures and policies, chain of command. At the time that this study was initiated, the old board operating procedures had not been reviewed for many years. Please remember that in June of last year, we adopted a brand new set of board operating procedures. This specific criticism in this paragraph on page 13 is clearly outlined in the board operating procedures. It explains to us exactly what the board's role is. and what the board's role isn't on our board operating procedures. It also explains in there how to handle complaints and contacts from the community. So I think we have, as a group, addressed that concern. There was another one that goes on and talks about further on down. There's a whole section dealing with continuing education. As y'all are all aware, the state lays out specific areas in which we have to be educated through continuing education classes. And actually on the following page, I think they've got a good listing there that's spelled out. One of the things that had happened is that we had been transitioning not only from a superintendent to a new superintendent in 2020, but we had a previous administrative assistant that also retired, and a new one came up, and with the two brand new superintendent, brand new administrative assistant, some things that used to be standard and routine may have fallen through the cracks. A million years ago, we didn't worry about continuing education. It was just entered for us. But TASB's changed their way of doing that to where now you enter it on your phone as you do it, and they also keep up with it. I went to the tab today on, if you're not using my TASB, I encourage you to. You can pull up your own CEC hours to see what's out there, to see what you need. They've redesigned their website. It's a little clumsy and it's not ideal. But here's what's going to happen. Our board operating procedures and actually our policy requires that once a year, the continuing education hours be announced at a board meeting. And this is going to happen in April. And actually the procedure and the requirement of this is a little odd because it says at a meeting before the election. We won't have an election for another year, but I'd like to make it regular and routine that each April we report this. And so within the next month or so, I encourage you to look at your own CEC hours. We're going to have Sylvia. I'm going to work with Sylvia to get a kind of group and try to put down a matrix where we lay that out. There's some areas that we've never had. I mean, some of us have never had training in. And as a rule of thumb, very frequently by attending the summer leadership conference, you can pretty much cover the areas that you need to cover. There are some things that they have reported us as zero that we did. We had, for example, well, I guess it was passed over, like the safety and security. We all went to the conference in Corpus this past year. It was all completely covered at that point. There was a concern in here also that new board members were not being adequately trained in local procedures. I can attest that at least 3 of y'all, we personally met, you were delivered the board operating procedures, you were shown where policies and procedures are, we went over operating board packages, and I want to make sure that that process continues going forward, and it's spelled out in our board operating procedures exactly what the president's supposed to do in terms of the new board members. So I think we've alleviated that also. There was a criticism here about us not having board operating procedures and there being several criticisms of that. We have addressed them. They were updated last June. In April or May, we will be bringing those back. There's a tweak that needs to happen to them in that they need to be tied directly to the board policies and procedures or the TEA section that they relate to, so that they all intermesh and that we make sure that we have it all covered. These are our procedures for our purposes to cover our meetings, but we want to make sure that we're compliant with what we're required to do. So we will be seeing that very quickly, and that's the time to make any changes that we need to. And there are still a few areas where procedures, board operating procedures, and overall board policy are a little inconsistent. We're going to try to bring those back into line too. There was a section on, moving on to page 15, there was a section that talked about confusion on how to get items on an agenda. This also was covered in the board operating procedures, and while there is still confusion out there, the board operating procedures only require one member to contact me in writing, or whoever the board president is, in writing to get an item placed on the agenda or explain why it's not going on the agenda or put on a future agenda. Please know that there are certain times of the year we're going to be looking at things that are going to be covered. If it relates to budget, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to be looking at it in October when we know that our budget process is starting right now. So that'll be discussed. In July, we will be adopting a calendar that outlines the rest of the year in terms of the items that we know already are going to be addressed. We know we have to look at insurance. We know we need to look at board operating procedures, at this continuing education, at the budget, some of the other things. And we've already made strides in getting there. We've got a little more to do. If there are any questions about how to get an item on the agenda, please, I direct you to the board operating procedure or call me. There was confusion over how officers were elected and whether it took a nomination or didn't take a nomination. They're suggesting that we put this in the board operating procedures. It's not there, and it's not in the kind of policy. We simply follow Robert's Rules of Order for election purposes. A nomination can be made by any member. It does not have to be seconded, and the elections follow by majority rule accordingly. There's a section in here which talks about the board operating procedures need to be reviewed annually, and they will be. We will be looking at those again in April, either April or May, to make sure that we've got that taken care of. There's a section that goes on then, beginning on page 16, that talks about the district organization. We're not going over that tonight. This is something that's more of a management function. Early on in this section, it talks about the inefficiencies that may happen when you don't have an optimal organization chart. And that's something that we're going to be working on, that management is going to be bringing to us as changes are made. There have been some staffing changes made. There have been some people realigned a bit. And so that's going to be a moving, living document that we're probably going to see coming for a while. On page 20, it deals with the district and campus improvement plans. We just addressed all of this at our very last meeting. But the more important part is when it goes into, on page 22, the strategic planning. We have not had a strategic plan here at KISD for many, many years. And frankly, the last one that we adopted did not really ever have the board buy-in that it needed to have. We're going to start planning for this summer, hopefully, to we've already spoken with some people that have experience in this in coming and beginning with us for some overall strategic planning. What needs to happen in that, and again, sometimes it turns into some loosey-goosey, very ethereal things, and we need a very practical strategic plan that has very focused and really a very few strategies that everything ties into. Our district improvement plan will tie into it. Our budget will tie into it. Our annual calendar, our board meetings, our board calendar will all tie into our strategic plan and be very focused. It's not something that we can easily do on our own. We need to have a facilitator for that. So we're going to begin moving through that. It's not going to be perfect the first time. It's going to be something that we're going to have to continue to kind of adjust and adapt. My goal is that we create procedures and policy at this board that doesn't bind the hands of any future boards, but at least sets the groundwork so that those boards know where we were going, where we were coming from, and can adjust that path accordingly. It's important to me that we do this each April, because having May elections means that we could have the potential of having some new members coming on the board with plans and procedures already in place. Again, they can be adjusted at any point in time, but at least we're not as disjointed and unorganized as first reading of this report would make it seem. Now, there's still some areas in here that we need to work on, we need to address, and I encourage anyone who sees anything in there that thinks that feels like it is important that we address and with some immediacy, please let me know and we'll certainly deal with that. But in terms of where we were when we got this report and where we are now, I feel like we have made a great deal of progress, at least in the board management and in the board information and operating procedures. Questions?
The thing you said is in conflict with something that said in the workshop. You said you wanted to use Robert's rules of order. I recognize that, but another time, a different workshop, it was mentioned that we are not based on Robert's rules of order, that we are guided by Robert's rules of order. And so, and I didn't want to know, are we guided by it? How do we know which rules we're guided by?
Foolish inconsistency is a hobgoblin of little minds. We don't want to bind our hands with Robert's Rules of Order. The point of Robert's Rules of Order is to conduct meetings in an orderly and professional manner. I don't want to get hung up on the Third Amendment has to be approved before the Fourth Amendment and this and that, and lay aside on the table and all that. What I was referring to in this instance is fairly standard nominating procedures in most meetings is that the chair opens the floor for nominations. Any person is allowed to nominate. Nothing has to be seconded. Any nominee can refuse the nomination or decline the nomination should they want to. And all of that was stated in here as people had a great deal of confusion about. If we need to spell that out specifically in our board operating procedures, we certainly can. But the standard just nomination of officers would just come out of the Robert's rule.
And I understand, and I can go either way, but that's what I'm saying is.
Well, I'm just not sure there is another way. I mean, I don't know what the other.
Because sometimes we're saying we're guided by. And other times you say, well, this is the way they do it, so you should know. Well.
Okay.
Either we do it that way or we're guided.
Let me clear, all right. It was stated in here, this report, that there was confusion. Some members did not know how the election of officers was handled and how to nominate them. All right. I don't know what they didn't know.
I agree.
So I guess I'm asking, is anyone here unclear of how nominations need to take place? And if they're not, then we move on.
Well, and I agree with you. You've cleared that instance up. But what I'm saying is in the past, we said we don't use Robert's rules of order, we're guided by it.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is on anything that we haven't gotten to yet, until we get there, we're still gonna have these same questions, and that's fine. And it's good, you're clearing them up as we talk, and I'm very, very happy with it.
And we'll guide ourselves with Robert's Rules of Order rather than because I don't want to. Yeah, I think it's absolutely silly for us to say we're going to do this every single time because life is not that black and white. It's very, very gray. But the whole intent here was in the portions dealing with the board. If there is anything that anybody's confused about or that we need to clarify, please let us know. Please let me know. I will do my best to address that, bring it back to the board so we can decide how we do want to do some stuff. And we will be looking at the board operating procedures Again, very quickly, we're free to make any kind of changes we can as long as we're not out of statutory compliance. But for the most part, then what I would like to do is turn back to page 9 initially, where you have those findings that say, we lack a clear understanding of our roles and responsibilities. I don't think that's true anymore. Where it says we lack an understanding of various board operations, which inhibits our effective stewardship of the district. I don't think that's true anymore. Where it says the Kingsville ISD does not have an effective and efficient organization related to superintendent supervisory responsibilities. That's the area that we're going to continue to work on. Where it talks about we lack an effective process to develop and administer its district and campus improvement plan. We just did that at our very last meeting. And where we lack a comprehensive strategic planning process, we still lack that, but it is something that is on the table that we're going to be looking at. And that's all I have on that, unless there are any questions. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have for tonight, unless someone has anything else to bring before the board. If not, I will declare this workshop meeting adjourned at 7:45 p.m.